Hi class, welcome back. I'm Marian Manalo. So now we are going to have a new discussion on understanding the self. Now let's go to the lesson 3, the self as connected construct. Okay, for this lesson, here we are at our objectives now. So at the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify the different ideas in psychology about the self. Second, create your own definition of the self based on the definition from psychology. And third, analyze the effects of various factors and identify the information of the self. Okay, in our previous lesson, we were able to identify the definition of the self. The self is unitary, the self is also independent, and also we're able to how to explain the self develop in the social environment and in the family. Now, we identify the definition of the self based on the concept of psychology. There are various definitions of the self and other similar or interchangeable concepts in psychology. Other concepts similar to self and identity and self-concept. Now, let's define first identity. Identity is a composed of personal characteristics, social roles, and responsibilities as well as affiliation to define who one is. Personal characteristics entails to our abilities and our evident characteristics that others might describe us. For example, your friend describes you as a very polite person, so that's one of your personal characteristics. Or you think, or other think, I can see you that you are very talented person. That's one of your personal characteristics as well. So personal characteristics, these are now people sees you how you are, what you think, and what do you they think your characteristics are. So this one of your personal characteristics. These are can be unique or you a characteristics have a characteristics that other have too for. For example, you are very good in playing the guitar. Your personal characteristics playing the guitar can also similar to others. Now, next, social roles entails on the status in the society. Example, your social role is rich or poor or in the middle class. Or social roles must be a student or working student. That's social role. Social role is it's defined by the society and our placement to the society and responsibilities entails to things that we do in the society. For example, you are the eldest son in your family and you are responsible in taking care of your siblings. That's your identity or the group leader of your class. So that's responsibilities and that's your identity. Next, affiliation. Affiliation entails to the organization that belong in. Example, if you worship leader in a Christian church, so that's your identity. So our identity can be defined by our personal characteristic, social roles, responsibilities, and affiliation. Next, self-concept is what basically comes to your mind when you're asked about who you are. Self-concept means it is idea of the self. For example, you think you are a kind person, so that's your self-concept. Or you think that you are a talented person, so that also your self-concept. Self-concept is your idea of the self. It's not what the society thinks of you, but it's the idea of yourself, that self-concept. Identity is the different to self-concept. Identity entails to what the society is telling us who we are, while self-concept is the thing or the idea of who we think we are, that self-concept. Self-advent, self-identity, and self-concept are not fixed in one time frame. They different like that I've mentioned in our previous lesson. Self is something that is in ourself. It is our own process, our own thoughts, and unique. It is unitary. Identity, these are things, or this is now what our society thinks of us. And self-concept is our ideas, ourself. Yes, the idea of ourself. These three words are not the same. Self-identity and self-concept can be interchangeable, but they are different now. Let's define self by one of the famous psychology, Carl Rogers, captured this idea in his concept of schema of our organizer system or collection of knowledge about who you are.
The schema is not limited to the example on the diagram. It may also include your interests, your work, your course, your age, your name, your physical characteristics, etc. As you grow and adapt to the changes around you, they also change. But they are not passive receivers. They actively shape and reflect how you see, think, and feel about things. For example, when someone states your first name, even if he is not talking about you, your intention is drawn to him. If you have a provincial language and you hear someone using it, it catches your attention. If you consider yourself a book lover, a bookstore may always entice you out of all the stores in a mall. ID. The instinctual part of the mind that contains sexual and aggressive drives and hidden memories. Ego. The realistic part that mediates between the desires of the ID and the superego. Superego operates as a moral conscience.
I am Bernadette Manalo report about symbolic interactionism. What is symbolic interactionism? It's a process that is in live the reciprocal meaning and values by aid of the symbols in the mind. According to G. H. Mead, 1934, argued that the self is created and developed through human interactions. According to them, Eiserman, Elmore, and Smith 2012, there are three reasons why self and identity are social products. First, we do not create ourselves out of nothing. Society helped in creating the foundation of who we are, and even if we make our choices, we still operate in our social and historical context, is one way or the other. Second, whether we like to admit it or not, we actually need others to affirm and reinforce who we think we are. We also need them as reference points about our identity. One interesting example is the social media interactions that we have. In the case of Facebook, there are those who will consciously or unconsciously try to garner more likes and positive reactions, and that can and will reinforce their self-concept. Third, what we think is important to us may also have been influenced by what is important in our social or historical context. Education might be an important thing into your self context because you grow up in the family that valued education. Money might be important to some because they may grow in low income. Families realize how important money is in addressing certain needs like medical emergencies, social interaction, and group affiliation. What is social interaction and group affiliation? A vital factors in creating our self-concept, especially in the aspect providing us with our social identity or perception of who we are based on our membership to certain groups. According to Gandini and Tari 2014, it is also inevitable that we have several social identities, that those identities can overlap, and we automatically play the rules as we interact in our groups.
Self awareness, conscious knowledge of one's own character, feelings, motives, and desires. Self awareness also present us with at least three other self schema. Number one is actual self. Number two is ideal self. Number three is odd self. The actual self is who you are at the moment. The ideal self is who you like to be. The odd self is who you think you should be. For example, you are a student interested in basketball, but also academically challenged in most of your subject. Your ideal self might to be practiced more in play with the varsity team, but ought to pass your subject as a responsible student. One has to find a solution to such discrepancies to avoid agitation, dejection, or other negative emotion in some instances. Self-awareness may be positive or negative, depending on the circumstances and our next course of action. Self-awareness also has a great impact on our self-esteem. Two types of self that we can be aware of: the private self, or your internal standard and private thoughts and feelings; the public self, or public image, commonly geared towards having a good presentation of yourself to others. Social relationship. One of the ways in which our social relationship affect our self-esteem is through social comparison, down, downward social comparison, and upward social comparison. Social comparison. According to the social comparison theory, we learned about ourselves, the appropriateness of our behaviors, as well as our social status by comparing aspects of ourselves with other people. Downward social comparison is more common type of comparing ourselves with others, comparing ourselves with those who are worse off than us. Upward social comparison. Another comparison which is comparing ourselves with those who are better off than us. Those who do this actually felt lower self-esteem as they highlight more of their weakness or inequities.
The next reporter of the topic of the self-cognitive construct, and a part of this is social comparison. Social comparison. in which in social relationships affects our self-esteem in truth social comparison, according to social comparison theory. What is social comparison theory? According to this, we learn of ourselves, the appropriateness of our behavior, as well as social status. Next. There are two ways social comparisons, the downward social comparison and the upward social comparison. The downward social comparison, the more common type of comparing ourselves to others. We create a positive self-concept by comparing ourselves with those who worse than us. Upward social comparison, comparing ourselves to those who better than us, while it can be a form of motivation for the same. Next. Social comparison entails self-evaluating maintenance theory, which states that we can feel threatened when someone outperforms. Do we react in three ways? First, we distance ourselves from the person. Second, we reconsider the aspect of our skill to be performed. And three, last, we try to improve the aspect of ourselves. Next. Narcissism. Narcissism is a trait characterized by overly high self-esteem, self-admiration, and self-centeredness. Narcissism, they are often charismatic because how they take their image, taking care of the image include their interpersonal relationship, those who will try to look better partners, better acquaintance, as well as people who will appreciate them a lot. Next. Truth self-esteem is a very important to self-study. Have shown it only has correlation, not causality, to positive outputs and outlook. In here, things self-esteem, this is important to the self. It's shown no cause or effect to the positive things that we do. And the positive outputs, like we do have positive things that we have, but only has correlation. It means in here, if you have a high self-esteem, you have a positive outlook in life. For example, you believe you can achieve the things as you can see a positive way. But the self-esteem will be not cause or effect how we are see a positive outlook and positive truth that we have. Last. Program activities and presenting style to the boost self-esteem should not for the purpose or merely trying to make children feel better about themselves or to appease them when they get angry or sad.